Welcome to the Two and Under podcast, the Southern Hemisphere's original Newcastle United podcast. I'm Jack, and we are here today to preview the Fulham v Newcastle game coming up. It feels like there's not been too much football lately, so we're excited to get back into the football. We do have a Fulham supporter with us, but before I introduce him, I just want to say hello to Keegan. You've got a couple of faces behind you there, I've noticed. You're still flying high.
I am absolutely airborne still. It's been an unreal week. So, yeah, really happy right now.
For people who don't know what we're talking about, and people in the UK as well, why are you so happy at the moment?
Well, yeah, I live in Geelong, born in Geelong, gone for Geelong my whole life, and we won the AFL Grand Final on Saturday against Sydney, which was great. Absolutely destroyed them, which was even better. That didn't have to worry about the result sort of all game and could actually enjoy it. First actual grand final I've been to that Geelong have won. So that was another pretty cool moment as well. So, yeah, it's been a pretty big few days. And, yeah, I still haven't actually had time to watch the replay yet. So that might be Saturday nights before the game. Saturday night's viewing is just to sit down, have a couple of beers and watch it all again. And
your dad actually used to work for Geelong, didn't he? I think he emigrated from the UK, from Ashington, and then he
grandma's from Ashington. Dad was born here, but yeah, he worked for Geelong for it was over 20 years. He's a life member at the club as well. So yeah, a lot of my childhood, I guess, was spent around the club and running around, probably being a pain in the ass to most of the players and staff and coaches who worked there as well. And it was my first job, my first actual paying job was working there as well. I worked as a water boy and helped set up training 2 nights a week. So yeah, I've got a bit of a strong connection to the club as well. So, but I think like most of the people around Geelong, we all know someone that knows someone who knows someone that's connected with the club. So it's a pretty tight-knit community down here, which pretty makes it even more special that you can enjoy it with everyone, and everyone's got a story to tell. And yeah, times like these, you really love hearing about everyone's stories and things like that.
Good on you. And for the UK people as well, the AFL Grand Final, it's basically the equivalent of the Premier League, isn't it? Like, they don't really have any other cups or anything.
Yeah, that's probably the easiest way. It's like a Premier League with a final series at the end. So you have your table after the home and away season, and then the top 8 teams playing a final series. So it's sort of like a hybrid cross, I guess, between the Premier League and the FA Cup. So imagine your Premier League and then your top 8 teams go into an FA Cup style arrangement, and then the best team wins. So that was us this year. So very happy still.
Good for you. Keep smiling. And we've got Elton as well from the new Australia-based Fulham podcast, That's So Craven. I was on their podcast a couple of nights ago with Jack, and we've had a substitution. Elton's come in for Jack tonight to talk to us. How are you doing, Elton? Thanks for coming on.
I'm very well, and thanks for having me. I listened to the pod this morning. We released that this morning, and I thought it was a really great chat and a nice idea. Really great idea.
Yeah, it was really good. It was nice it's always nice to chat to supporters of other Premier League clubs or UK clubs in Australia, because you kind of have that shared sort of understanding of what it's like getting up in the middle of the night or first thing in the morning. You're in Perth as well, aren't you? So your kickoff times are slightly different to ours.
That's right. Well, we've got the 3 of us on the pod. So for those who don't know, it's a family pod. It's myself and my 2 sons. And one son is in Perth with me and another son is in Melbourne. So we're a little bit split. So we've got a few time differences to work through. But look, I think also, we're not professionals. We're football fans. We take it pretty seriously. And but that probably means we never really know enough about the opposition, unless they are, one of the top 3 or 4 clubs where everyone knows pretty much everyone. And so it's really great to get a much better insight for how things might turn out.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've definitely found that with the podcast that we've done. We did one with Nottingham Forest supporter earlier in the season, and that was really good. Like you say, you get that insight that you wouldn't usually get because a lot of the news or the media is dominated by the big 6 clubs. So, there are 14 other clubs in the league, and it's good to get those insights as well. So tell us a bit about your background with Fulham then, Elton. You're Australian, but you lived in the UK, I believe. So how did you come to be supporting Fulham and bring that support back to Australia?
Yeah, pretty accidental. A good friend of mine who had a son Jack's age, so another Jack, bit confusing, but my son's Jack as well. Jack was a pretty keen football fan, and he was a Carlisle fan, my friend. And it was a cup game, Carlisle away versus Fulham, 1997, 98, something like that. And so we went along as sort of Carlisle fans on the day, really, with open minds. And it just kind of went from there. We loved the feel of the club. It's a really family-oriented club. And it was very much in those days, it was very easy to walk in on a Saturday afternoon and get a ticket, which is attractive because, all the other bigger London clubs, you simply cannot do that. And it, just felt great to be taking a 10-year-old along to a game in that sort of environment. So Jack started following it pretty closely, and he's probably been the most ardent follower, and he's kind of dragged us along. And so when we started going to a lot of games in England, and we followed it pretty carefully for probably about 7 or 8 years, I suppose. And then we moved back to Australia and began the journey of being a remote Premier League supporter. the stuff we all know everything about.
And it hasn't always been the Premier League for Fulham either, has it? So we'll talk about
Absolutely
that.
Not.
We'll talk about that in a minute as well. But I'm interested with Fulham. What is it that makes them such a good? Because everyone always says they're a family club. I've got friends who support Fulham as well, and they do seem to have that really nice kind of feel about them. And what do you think it is about Fulham particularly that makes them get that kind of reputation and that sort of nice feel that everyone likes them?
Well, I'm not sure about whether everyone likes them, but I think the other sort of 3 big London clubs have been big for a really long time. They've always been wealthy. Before mega money arrived in football, they've always been wealthy. And Fulham, whilst they've always been in and around the Premier League and top league football for a really long time, it's just never been a superstar club with certainly a very, very modest international following. And I think maybe the charm of the place with the old cottage, and they've never tried to lose that. They've never tried to rip it all down and build a 60,000-seater stadium. Even today's remodeled stadium, it's modern, but it still maintains quite an intimate feel. It's quite a small ground. And it's one of those old style grounds sort of tucked in a very suburban kind of part of London. And yeah, I think I think it's the late arrival of money. We've had wealthy owners in the form of Al Fayed, and the Khans are not exactly poor people, but we've never had the mega wealth, which I guess changes the tone of the club, which maybe you guys are about to embark on that very journey.
Yeah, probably. It seems that way. But Craven Cottage is a beautiful little stadium. Yeah, I've been a couple of times, and you get off the tube and you walk through this parkland area, and then
Yeah,
it's right on the river as well, which is it's just beautiful. And I was actually surprised when I watched the Liverpool game this season about that new stand, because I hadn't seen anywhere that Fulham were expanding or getting a new stand. And all of a sudden it was there, and it wasn't. I don't think there was anyone sitting in it for that game. It looked a bit. It wasn't quite
I
finished.
can't remember now when they opened it, but it's been a long time coming. It seems to be been in the process of being built for, the last couple of years. It's still not fully open. There's the bottom tier of what looks like about 10 or 20 rows, and that's it. So I'm not sure what the holdup is, but it's a beautiful stand, and it sort of incorporates sort of community facilities and bars and entertainment areas. It's sort of taking advantage of its proximity to the river and things like that. Yeah, look, I mean, it's not all of our clubs are commercial enterprises. They have to be, right? But it's a friendly family kind of feel about it.
So I'm going to give a little history about Fulham and then ask you what the kind of experience has been like of supporting what has been a yo-yo club, I think, in recent seasons. But Fulham they got promoted for the first time in 2001 when Al Fayed was there. And then they were in the Premier League for 12 seasons, or 13 seasons even, actually, because it wasn't until 2014 they got relegated, and Khan took over in 2013. And then it took them 4 years to get promoted. So they had a promotion in 2018, relegation in 2019, promotion in 2020, relegation in 2021, and promotion again finally in 2022. Obviously hoping very much not to get relegated in 2023. But what's the experience been like because Fulham and Norwich have kind of missed each other each of those seasons, each of those relegation and promotion seasons. So they really have been a bit of a yo-yo club. But what's the experience been like for you following that from afar? And have you been able to watch the games when they were in the Championship and follow it closely?
Well, the answer is with great difficulty and not very frequently, because it's only been pretty recent that the clubs have got about providing pretty good websites and apps with their own coverage. So the smaller clubs, the bigger clubs have had that for a while, but Fulham certainly didn't. And in the first Championship season in recent years that I remember, it was about finding dodgy streams, in Asia and wherever to pick up, and you'd be dropping out 20 times a game on a laptop. It was pretty miserable stuff, pretty frustrating stuff. And it's only been in very recent years. I mean, last year in the Championship, we were pretty fortunate, really. We had Fulham TV, had to pay a fortune for it, which is unfortunate. But, we at least had Fulham TV, which allowed us to watch the games on a pretty regular basis. So, tough. One being a long way away, lots of hurdles and obstacles to actually watching games, but just kind of miserable with the prospect. We never felt safe in the Premier League, in the last couple of years or the last couple of campaigns. Never ever managed to get anywhere near safe. We were always under threat.
Yeah.
And I think we have to put some of that down to brand new owners, new to football clubs at least, not new to sporting clubs, but new to football clubs, and a father-son team where, Tony Khan, the kind of CEO, if you like, of the club, he's copped a lot of stick because he kind of has his own way, and he has his own kind of little stats matrix that he works off for how he recruits players. And we blew up badly. We spent 120 mil on our first return to the Premier League, and we kind of did a Chelsea of many years ago and bought a bunch of players, although we didn't buy the greatest quality players. We bought kind of oddball players and paid a premium for them, and we threw them together, hopefully. And it just doesn't work. It doesn't work unless, of course, you buy 8 absolute brilliant players who don't need any management and will run rings around anyone and kind of stitch wins together that they probably have no right to.
Well, I was thinking about Nottingham Forest as well, because what they've done this summer seems to be like kind of what Fulham did last time out, but times 20. They seem to have gone completely crazy. And I was going to ask you about Fulham's transfer policy this time round compared to last time.
Yeah. The transfer window, when it first opened, we did not do a lot of business. But what I will say, we actually picked up Palhinha quite early. And, it didn't really create that much interest or raise that many eyebrows. But we picked him up early. And, honestly, we were pretty frustrated with the speed that things were happening. They just weren't going quickly. And we thought, oh, Tony, please stop trying to be cute. He loves the final day transfer window and, bringing in 6 guys so that maybe he feels like he gets a pat on the back for doing great business deals. But it's intensely frustrating. And previous managers and Silva's had to deal with it as well. Ends up with a new squad really late, no preparation. And Silva's very much a manager who, he'll buy players, and it doesn't matter who you are, you're not straight on the park until you understand the way we play, as it should be, right?
Yeah.
And so even though some guy may be twice as good as the person he's come in for, he's not going to get minutes until he understands the system. And so, when you're buying players in the last 2, 3, 4 days of the transfer window, what chance have you got?
Yeah, that approach sounds quite familiar, Keegan, doesn't it? With the way that Eddie Howe's been managing things for us.
Yeah, definitely. We had the same discussion. I was going to say last year, but last season with Bruno and stuff like that, he was made to wait and bide his time and wait, see what the league was about. But at the same token, he didn't want to upset the apple cart, and with Joe and John Joe,
yeah,
the big John,
all the Joes.
So yeah, they were doing the job. We were winning games. They were playing well. So he didn't just hand games out, which I think any manager should. But I agree with Elton. Like the quicker you can get your players in before the season and use them in pre-season and get them up to speed with how you want to play is really, really important, I think. And especially if you're a newly promoted club, you sort of want to hit the ground running with your squad and pick up early points, because they're probably only going to get harder as the season gets on.
Yeah.
With last season, then, just before we'll go into the start to this season for Fulham, which has probably exceeded all expectations, what was last season like? Obviously, Mitrović, who we can talk about him again later as well, but he scored 43 goals, which is ridiculous, really. But what was Fulham's kind of style of play under Marco Silva last season, and has that translated so far to this season, or has it been a bit of a change-up?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. Fulham, to be fair, other than a couple of slip-ups where I think we lost concentration or maybe got a bit carried away with ourselves, we had things our own way. And I think there was quite a gap between ourselves and a couple of other teams and the rest. Not that we weren't beaten by teams way below us on a couple of occasions. So we dominated possession, and we used Mitrović to great effect, and it was pretty easy for us. I mean, it's never easy to win in the Championship where it's got a really tough and grueling schedule. You need a squad because there are going to be injuries. You're going to burn players, but we did that pretty well. But on the whole, I think we did it fairly comfortably. and we were spared having to go through the playoffs, which gets you off the training ground or off the circuit even earlier to get some rest and to actually start preparing. And one of the things that I think, as Fulham fans, we've begun to really appreciate is that Silva's a smart coach. He's a smart manager. He may not be a top 3 or top 4 kind of guy, but I always regard really good managers as people who can leverage what they've got in incredible ways, in really clever ways. And what he's done is he's actually transformed the style of play from the end of last season to this season. Knowing that we were never going to be able to play possession football and keep the ball against top sides. It just wasn't going to work. And we'd sit back and, it started with Parker, which we won't go into, but Parker was a very sort of passive, very defensive and quite negative style. Silva didn't throw that out completely. He certainly kept the possession style football, but just added a bit of punch to it and a little directness to it. But that's been really stepped up this season where, I think all Fulham supporters have been quite taken aback at how hard we've pressed and how much more direct we've been. So there's still that element of Fulham has always like to play beautiful football, passing football. And we're still doing that, but we're not obsessed with holding the ball and setting up 15 passes before we actually make a direct move forward.
It's a clever thing to be able to do, isn't it, for a manager that? Because Newcastle is sort of going through the opposite process, where we've been a really defensive and counter-attack based team for quite a lot of years. And then now we're trying to become this more front foot, possession-based attacking side. And we're coming up against problems with that because the players are not used to it. And because teams like what Bournemouth did are sitting in and defending and frustrating against us. So it's a really intelligent thing. And for a manager, I think, to be able to adapt like that and actually execute it as well as just having the thought to do it, isn't it?
Yeah. And look, man for man, we're simply not the most skillful side in the competition, and we're far from it. But what's been interesting is that in certain phases of some games, when we have sat back and tried to control the game and been given the ball, we've actually done it pretty comfortably. Now, look, I don't think you're going to try and do that against Man City because they'll just take the ball from you. But whereas in the last season, 1 to 3 seasons, we've probably been very predictable and had only one style of play that we perfected and did very well. I see more elements to our game plan now. And I was listening to an article, or not an article, a discussion actually on another well-known Fulham podcast. And they were talking about how we just weren't very good at the transitions of moving from defense into attack, or from attack to suddenly now backing up and defending. And we've improved that big time. But it's also having a plan and being able to execute, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's have a look then at Fulham's form this season. It's been really, really good. We're going to compare it with Newcastle. So both teams have played 7 games. Fulham have won 3 games. Newcastle have just won 1. Fulham have lost 2. Newcastle have lost 1. Fulham have drawn 2 games. Newcastle have drawn 5, which has been the big thing we've done. Fulham are 6th in the league. Newcastle are 10th. Fulham have scored 12 goals to Newcastle's 8, but have conceded 11 to Newcastle's 7. Quick look at the league table there. They are sitting in 6th above Chelsea. That's got to be nice, even though it's a game extra played. It's still very, very early doors, obviously.
We'll take it.
You'll take it, yeah.
We'll screenshot it all day long.
Absolutely, yeah. It's still very, very early days in the league. So the league table can belie things a little bit at this stage, I think, and it'll probably settle down at some point. But what have you made, Elton, of Fulham's start to the season then? That seems to be very, very impressive for a promoted team to have to be putting that kind of form together.
Look, it's been, we often talk about what a great time it is to be a Fulham supporter, because it's been tough for the last few years. Everyone talks about, having a great start. Keegan can tell you all about it in grand finals. You win it in the first quarter and the third quarter. Isn't that right, Keegan?
Absolutely. And then you party in the last.
Yeah. But really, look, you need a bit of luck. Football's a different kind of a game, and it's low scoring and a couple of slip ups, and you're in a very, very different position. Whereas in AFL, the better teams tend to run with form, and it's a higher scoring game. It tends to be more predictable. Look, we've all been amazed how well we've done, and we've had a tricky first few games. We've had Liverpool, we've had Arsenal, we've had Spurs, and who would have believed it was almost a free hit for us going into Liverpool, thinking, well, we may as well just go for it. There was some talk of putting our youngsters out and just having a crack, and we jumped them really early, and it was I think the system was probably still pretty fresh and new, and maybe we hadn't quite perfected it, because I think if we played against Liverpool like we played against maybe Arsenal, we may have actually got a better result. Or having said that, we let Arsenal go as well, because we actually had points in that game. So look, unbelievable start from our perspective. Fulham fans view the season as to how close we are to safety in terms of points for likely safety from relegation. That's kind of the way we've looked at things. Now to be 6 games in, by no means safe, but we've seen enough to fear very little. We feel quite confident that, without getting carried away, we feel pretty confident against most of the sides. We feel like we can be really competitive. That doesn't mean we'll win everything, but we feel like we can be really competitive. Sorry.
Looking at the results as well, that win over Brighton stands out, because Brighton started the season absolutely on fire. Newcastle were quite lucky to escape with a draw from our away game there, and Fulham beat them 2-1. That was a big win, wasn't it? That was a really big result.
Oh yeah, I think that was the kind of crunch moment that where we face reality. It's okay to cause an upset, even if that's a draw against a big team, because sometimes that can happen. But when you meet your supposed equal, you've got to deliver, right? And that was a moment. That was a real moment for us, where I think perhaps people went, maybe something is happening here.
Yeah, and coming from behind to beat Forest as well, probably you would still regard them as one of the teams that will be around Fulham at the end of the season. So to come from behind like that, again, massive.
Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago, Fulham couldn't score goals, and Mitrović was benched. Parker didn't play him. We couldn't score goals. That was different last season, but we had pretty much one outlet for goal scoring through Mitrović. Very few other people were contributing. It feels different this year. It feels smart. The team, the manager realizes that if you score a hatful of goals, you're going to get marked, and you're going to get a couple of people on you. So you got to be smarter, and you've got to take them out of the game and create space. And he's starting to do that to pretty good effect. So look, really encouraging to come from behind and get a win. Who would have thought?
Mm-hmm. Before I ask you about Mitrović, I'm going to come to you, Keegan. Mitrović was at Newcastle from 2015 till I think it was about 2018 or so. He did all right for us. He scored about 15 goals for us in 60-odd games. What was your thoughts about Mitrović when he was at Newcastle? Because he was very, very popular because of his style of play, but he had issues as well when he was with us. So what was your take on Mitro when we had him?
He was a ticking time bomb. Well, I think everyone was just, it was like I used to think he was like a secret sound or like the beat the bomb on a radio contest where you just have to quickly say stop before you can see how quickly he's going, oh, when's the bomb going to go off? And I think that was the attraction for him. Like he was box office because you didn't know what you were going to get. You were going to get a red card. Were you going to get 2 or 3 goals? Was he just going to sook and be shit the whole game? Like every game was, you never knew what you were going to get. And I think he was young and immature and his heart was in the right place. Like he wanted to be a good player and he wanted to play well for us. But I just think at that stage of his life, he wasn't quite mentally ready to perform the way his mind wanted him to perform. Now, who knows? There's a multitude of reasons why that might be, but it seems to be, especially the last couple of years, he's got his mindset and his attitude in the right place. And I think his performances are really starting to show what the player. I think everyone thought he could be the player that he is now, but he just wasn't. He wasn't quite mentally ready to do that. Now he seems to have his whole life and understand his game and understand the game as well. And I think he's like I said, his last sort of 18 months has been really, really good and showed everyone the player that he could have been for us, but he is now for Fulham.
He was immature when he was with us, definitely. And like you said, he had discipline problems. I think he got, within like seconds of his debut, he came on and kicked somebody and could have been sent off. And then in the last game of the Premier League season, when we got relegated under Rafa, he got sent off in that game, which we actually won 5-1 against Spurs. But that meant he was suspended for the start of the Championship season. And I think he wasn't a good mix with Benitez as well, who's a manager who likes players to do exactly what they're told to do, and he doesn't like mavericks. But I don't think Mitro has ever been a player that you can say, I mean, I know that he struggled in the Premier League last time out with Fulham, but they were a poor team then. He scored goals for Newcastle in the Premier League. I think he got 11 one season and 9 and another season. For Fulham, he scored 9. So I think he's always had that in him. He was scoring goals in the Champions League for Anderlecht before he even came to Newcastle. But Elton, did anyone kind of last time he was in the Championship, he did score 20-odd goals, but did anyone predict he was going to step up and have a 40-plus goal season last season? Because that's just remarkable statistics, isn't it?
I always feel that Mitrović is like he's grown into his body. If you think about the style of his game, he's a strong guy. He stands his ground. He uses his body. And if a young guy has got that kind of physicality, you got to hope and pray that he's pretty sensible and pretty level and pretty mature with it as well, because it's going to be a problem. And he never had that. And he's definitely grown up. There's still that Mitro, but I can't remember the last time he got a yellow card. He still whinges too much at the ref when something goes against him, and he remonstrates forever. And you just sort of think, Mitro, just give it up, as if it's going to be overturned. And I wonder whether that's part of his approach to the game, and that psychs him up and fires him up, or whether that's actually distracting him. I haven't quite worked that out. But I suspect it could be part of his gamesmanship, because if you watch him at the end of a game, he's the friendliest bloke with opposition. And he's literally going and hugging and kissing the guys who he's spent 90 minutes with out of genuine respect and admiration for them. And he can be a bit of a, he's definitely improved that side of his game big time. He's settled. He likes London. He loves Fulham. He's a massive player at the club. And maybe that's given him confidence or self-worth, however you want to put it. That's just made him kind of wind his head in a bit and realize. And I think also once you do score so many goals in a season and you literally carry a club to a win, you have to start realizing that you cannot get red cards. You're so important, pivotal, and the whole club's depending on you. It's time to grow up.
What about his actual football then? How has he improved that? Because he's never been the most mobile player, but from what I've seen of him this season, he's just been bullying players, and he seems to have gained an awareness and kind of an intelligence about how to use the attributes he's got, which he never used to have as well.
I think when you listen to Silva, definitely, when you listen to Silva talk about him, it's not just admiration because he's scoring lots of goals. I think there's a deep respect for how hard he's learned. He's sort of how hard he works off the ball, and he comes deep. He actually collects the ball, holds up play, and his assists have been not just numerous, but really high quality. So he's got that other element to his game. Most people think of him as just a target man, good old school centre forward. But there's definitely another dimension to Mitrović that's come on in the last, I'm going to say only 12, maybe 18 months, because he was potentially out the door during the Parker period. He was very unhappy. Parker never came out and said it, but he just never picked him. And I think I think there's perhaps a connection between Eddie Howe and Silva, in that not only are they tactically pretty smart and deep thinkers about the game, not that everyone at Premier League level isn't, but I think they're particularly good. And I think in addition to that, I think they're really good man managers. And I think with Mitro, who's, he's got a massive ego. He's got he's got very physical, and so if that doesn't work for him, his tail is no doubt between his legs, and so it's an ego that you've got to massage and look after. But back to your point also about new transfers coming in and not getting a gig straight away. That's also a great part of man management, right? You let every player know that it's a meritocracy, and you don't just walk in here because we paid 60 million for you. You've got to prove yourself, and you've got to prove that you understand the system, and you've got to earn that position. And I think that counts for a lot.
It's going to be really interesting to see the tactical setup in this match. I think, like you were saying, two young managers who think ahead, and they have plan B, C's, D's and E's as well. And it'll be interesting to see what Eddie Howe is going to try and do about controlling Mitrović. Maybe we can try and wind him up a bit to see if we can get some of that old Mitro out, see if we can kick somebody and get himself sent off. But he seems to have matured past that a little bit. So let's have a look at the lineups then. This is the one that your Jack sent through when I asked him for what he thought Fulham might set up like. He actually pointed out to me that Paulini is actually suspended in this game, which I didn't realize. Right. Yeah, he's picked up 5 yellow cards in his 7 games, so he's going to be a big miss. But yeah, just talk us through the possible Fulham setup for this game, and is this what it's likely to be, or is there a few injury concerns, or what's it going to look like?
Look, one of the problems we have, we've just about fallen over the line with a pretty good 11, and we're no Man City with depth, right? So the one area that we knew we had to improve to be competitive at Premier League level was in our wing, our wings. So we bought a couple of players, and then we had 2 injuries before the start of the season. So Harry Wilson, who was brilliant for us in the Championship, and obviously that's got to be translated into Premier League, but I think that's a reasonable prospect. We bought Solomon, who was injured in I think a trial match the day after he got a few minutes, and he's got a pretty serious injury, so he's out for quite a while, maybe till after the international break, I think, earliest. But we've got this unit which is functioning really well, but we're fragile. We really, if we get 3 games in a row and there's some tired legs, we don't have instant replacements that can walk on and just carry on business. And we've had an injury with Robinson. There's still a cloud over Robinson. It's unclear as to whether he's fit. I believe he did not go to the US team in the recent break. He did what looked like a pretty innocuous ankle injury, but ankles, knees, they're never straightforward. And so he hasn't played for a couple of weeks, and that includes the missed fixture with the death of the Queen. He's been excellent for us at left back. I think there's probably Premier League concerns about his defensive capabilities, but he's quick, carries the ball really well, and he gives us plenty down that left side. We've really had to scratch through the barrel to try and plug that gap. We tried Mbabu there in one game. It was an absolute disaster. He's a almost entirely right-footed player playing at left back. It didn't work. So we've got Polini out. That's a massive hole. He's been controlling the game. He's been incredible for us. And our whole game has pivoted around him. He's given our defense a huge amount of protection and shielding, and he and Reed have operated really well together. So that's a massive wild card in terms of how we plug that gap. Chalobah is the squad replacement for Polini, but he's yet to prove himself at Premier League level. He's a funny one. He's clearly talented, and Silva's the kind of guy who he wouldn't give him a shirt in the squad if he didn't believe in him. But we also, that is a clear weak spot in our transfer window. We simply did not buy 2 great, CDMs. Look, we got one, so we have to be happy. But that's a big problem, and everyone, as Polini has been collecting yellow cards, unbelievably. Everyone's very quick to say, "Oh, look, he'll keep us in games and win us games, and it's worth it for him to have a rest every 5." Well, here we are, and it doesn't feel very good. And and if he picks up 10, that's a couple of games, and God forbid if he picks up 15, is that 3 games?
I think 2 or 3. Yeah.
That's untenable.
That's what Cheikhtiota used to do that for Newcastle. He used to pick the yellow cards up all the time.
It's interesting. He's a funny one. I don't know if you've watched him play much, but he's a really quiet, strong guy. He just goes about his business, just loves the tackle. Not reckless, but just he's a hard man. And so I think he's made more tackles than anyone in the Premier League. And that's going to be a massive miss for us. So there's a number of different people who could fill that role. There's Chalobah, which it wouldn't surprise me if he plays, but I'd be thinking that's. I know a lot of Fulham fans would be drawing pretty deep breath if he is named in the starting lineup, because he's certainly not proven, and he tends to just drift out of games, which is not what you want your CDM to do. Diop had his first start last week and had a really excellent game. He looked so comfortable on the ball, carried the ball really beautifully, terrifyingly was sort of dribbling the ball around midfielders and pulling it off quite very confidently. So I don't know if CDM's in his wheelhouse, but he's a good footballer. You can see that. He might not have the pace for CDM or the acceleration, if you like. The other wild card for me could be Tim Ream. He played CDM for Bolton, and so he understands that position. He's been having a blinder so far this season, and I almost wouldn't want to jinx it because he's at the tender age of 34. He's fit. He's not that quick, but he is. I think his interception stats are way up there, and he's a very good defender. He reads the game really well, and his distribution is great. So, he's well capable of playing long balls and switching play, which he often does, from the back four. And of course, the other person who could be in that position is Tom Cairney. And I mean, Tom, obviously he's a massive player for Fulham, but he rarely starts these days. He's an impact sub in that he comes on to control the game rather than score goals. Every time I try and think about his negatives, they never seem to overly bother him. He's so one-sided, it's terrifying. But he is skillful, and he plays with the ball at his feet very, very well. It always feels like we slow down and we lose a lot of dynamism when Tom Cairney comes on. He does play beautiful balls, but it's at a slower pace. And I think that's something that we've tried to get away from. And I think if Tom Cairney's in that position, trying to control the game, then it feels like Fulham a year ago.
And you've got Pereira there, who used to play for Manchester United, and Willian's turned back up in the Premier League as well. How have those two been going for Fulham? Well,
Pereira's been a little bit patchy, but definitely signs of great skill, and he's got an engine on him as well. He's been covering a lot of ground and doing a lot of work off the ball. What we've really missed prior to this season is any quality from dead ball situations. We've had no one that can really put pace on the ball into threatening areas. So Pereira has definitely given us that. And Willian it's pretty tricky as well. He's actually very skillful, and he's obviously, he's not young anymore, but he's got a really good football brain. And I think a lot of people were not very keen on that signing, but on a free and wages we could afford, it's kind of like it's a really nice option to have.
Good experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's proven. He's a proven player, and he's clever. He's clever. He's skillful, but he's got a brain. And I think we kind of lack that a little bit in our wingers. We've got pace in Dan James, who we haven't talked about. Harry Wilson's relatively quick. Bobby Decordova-Reid and Neeskens Cabano, who sometimes also plays out on the left. they're quick, but they're not highly skillful players, and they love to run at defenders, but they often get dispossessed. It often doesn't mount to much.
Yeah, we've got a couple of those ourselves as well. Not much end product with some of our attackers, which we'll talk about in a minute. But Fulham, they're set up in kind of a 4-2-3-1, is it? Or is it more? Is it a bit more fluid than that, or is it quite structured in that setup?
No, that is the setup. And what's been happening in just the last week or two is that it's been quite noticeable that Reed, Polinia sits back and doesn't push forward, much beyond midfield, if you like. Whereas Reed tends to be box to box and just harrying and breaking down or putting out fires, if you like. That's been something new for us, and that seems to be working quite well. Bobby Decordova-Reid is kind of our Swiss Army knife. He's actually a pretty handy player. He can play in a number of different positions. He can play at left wing back. He can play on the left and the right. And again, he's got that utility to his game, but he's not international level. So we can deploy him to plug gaps, but it's more a safe gap plug than a really exciting and meaningful placement of a player.
All right, and obviously we've talked all about Mitro there as well, so he's definitely one that we've got to. I'm scared of him, to be honest. The current form he's in, we'll have to see what we can do to contain him. But here's the Newcastle setup. So Newcastle have had our share of injuries as well, unfortunately, for us. But there's been a bit of positive news, Keegan, on a couple of returnees. How do you think Newcastle are going to set up and approach the game with the players we've got available and based on what Elton's told us about Fulham just now?
I think we'll approach it the same way we've approached every game. I think we'll attack the game and hopefully create enough chances like we have been, but the difference will need to be that we actually convert the chances that we create. That's obviously been our biggest problem this year. Teams been hard to pick. Like, we haven't really heard that much information over the last couple of weeks with the injuries with Wilson and Bruno and ASM. All we'd sort of know was that it was reported that Wilson and Bruno were a little bit ahead of what ASM was. He had a setback. We don't actually know what the injury was, so it's hard to pick what the setback is. So that's basically the reason why I haven't picked him. He seems he's uploaded a few social media posts. He looks like he's back in some kind of heavy training, but I don't think that'll be enough for him to start the game, even if he is past fit, especially with his injury history over the last sort of 12 months as well. He's missed a few games, so I think they'd probably err on the side of caution rather than risk him for a game and risk losing him for another 3 or 4 as well. So, like Wilson's, by all reports, he should be right to go, which is good news, but sort of bad news at the same time with Isak picking up another injury while he's away on international duty. So that doesn't sound good. But and with Wood as well, Wood went off against Australia with what looked to be a rib injury as well after about 30 minutes for New Zealand. So our striking department looks a bit thin at the moment. So Big Joe might have to fill in, unfortunately, for him and for us, if and when Wilson goes down. So yeah, I think, and I've also gone with Byrne over Botman. He started last game, performed pretty well, and I think might be a bit more physical with Mitro. You might be able to handle him a little bit better and a bit of a stronger body. And I'm not sure Botman would have played against many players as physical and as aggressive as what Mitro is. So I think maybe that might be the smarter and safer pick. But I mean, we didn't think that Blackburn was going to play the last game either. So it's all a bit of guesswork at the moment. But yeah, that's how I can sort of see us lining up.
Elton was talking about the difficulties Fulham have when they've got key players injured, and it's exactly the same for Newcastle, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think for anybody outside of the top Manchester City or Liverpool, or even Liverpool, or bigger clubs or better teams struggle when they've got the best players out. But Fraser and Miggy, like they've got the running, they've got the work ethic. They just haven't got the end product, have they? They need to start producing something soon for us.
Yeah, and I sort of what Elton was saying about the bench and the lack of sort of depth and stuff like that. We've had this conversation for the first 7 games, haven't we? We've got no spark, or we're very, very vanilla on the bench. We don't really have anything or anyone that can come on and change a game for us if things aren't going our way. If we're in front, we've got plenty of players who can maintain status quo and keep a lead and defend it, but we don't actually have that many players to come off and change and chase a game if we need it. And like we've said, that's when we'll know we're a good side, when we can look at our bench and say, yeah, we've got some pretty good players who are on there who can help change the game if things aren't going our way.
Yeah, Jack was telling me, Elton, that one of the things Mitrović has been doing this season has been pulling off the defender and basically jumping on the right back and scoring headers at the back post. We saw him do that against Trent Alexander-Arnold. Trippier is a phenomenal right back. He's a brilliant footballer, but he's not very tall. So that could be something that Fulham could potentially do to target. Do you think that could be a route that they'll potentially go down in this game, sticking him on Trippier, or even Shah's not great in the air?
Oh, look, it's definitely a massive feature of Mitro's game, and you wouldn't have to be a football analyst to know that. And he's certainly been dropping off behind that right back, but actually, as I mentioned before, what's encouraging and interesting is that there are clearly lots of training ground set pieces which Mitro is not the end target of. And I think when you have a star goal scorer that everyone is kind of over focusing on, a smart team kind of pivots and does something different there. And so it'll be interesting to see if he's aggressive in the air, he jumps well, he's got a really strong head. If the ball's anywhere near him, he just, that last half a yard, he goes so aggressively at it, so single-mindedly at it. So he's difficult to beat in the air. But we've also got some other height, on set pieces. We've got a couple of pretty big, tall defenders who got good heads. Tosin Adarabioyo, he's scored a header last week. I think what's interesting is that we're both suffering from some quite significant injuries. Every team has injuries, but you guys have got some really great injured players. Which is
Maximan especially has been a big miss because he was in good form as well before he got injured.
Yeah, and has Bruno been out as well?
Yeah, he has. Yeah, so he's been injured for a few games. He came back for the last game against Bournemouth, but he wasn't really fully fit. And then he went away on international duty and he got injured on international duty. But the soundings seem to be that he's going to be fit for this. And I think that could be the difference for us between winning this game and not winning it. If he's fit and he's on form, I think, especially with Paulini missing, I think that's going to be a really big bonus for us.
Look, I think the type of teams that Newcastle and Fulham are, that you take one player out, it makes a massive difference. It really does. And, we've been making do with wingers and Decadova-Reid on the left or on the right and Caban on the left. If Harry Wilson was fit and Solomon stayed fit and proved himself in the Premier League, it's possible those guys wouldn't get many minutes. and they've done a great job, but they were probably only makeshift. Well, that's unfair, but they were probably going to be spending most of the time on the bench.
With the game, Keegan, like we struggled, Elton, in the last game against Bournemouth. We really struggled to break them down, and that's what I was saying before about this transition. Newcastle are having to go from being a defensive counter-attacking team to a team that's on the front foot and got possession. But do you think this game, Keegan, could potentially be a bit more suited to us, and the fact that Fulham are not going to probably sit off us and defend in the way Bournemouth and to an extent Crystal Palace did as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think most teams in the Premier League will actually be attacking at their home ground, and there's not many who would actually just sit back and let other teams come at them on their home turf. And I think the way Fulham have started, they've obviously scored 12 goals already, which is a few more than what we've scored. And I think we've been a pretty attacking side as well. So given the way that we want to play, we're pretty steadfast, and we want to attack the game and attack the opposition. And I don't think Fulham will take a backward step either. So yeah, it could actually play into our hands. It might not be as good without Maxi, because they're the games he seems to thrive in when there's space and it's up and down. And you think back to the Man City game, he was probably man of the match in that game as well, because it was just end to end and both teams having a crack at each other. So, I mean, I don't think this game would probably reach the levels of the Man City game, but I think the game in principle will have the same sort of tone where both teams will be attacking and looking to get at each other, and hopefully that leaves enough space for us to sort of start getting and play on instinct and counter attack, rather than when we have to hold the ball and try and break teams down, because we probably don't have the players or the quality at this stage to actually do that.
What's your sense on this, Elton? Do you think Fulham are going to come and attack this, being the home team and being in good form? Or do you think they might have looked at Newcastle's struggles against teams that have sat deeper and they might try and sit in a bit and frustrate us?
If you asked me the question of how we were going to start last week with our lineup that was, a really well-oiled machine, I would have been 100% confident that we'd jump into it and come out really pressing. I think the instinct will be to continue that and that become our brand of football this year. But I wonder what impact a sort of a lesser level of confidence in that central defensive midfield position is going to actually, what kind of impact that's going to have, and whether we'll feel, because as I said before, the big thing about our defense even last year wasn't amazing, and we've picked up a couple of players who have plugged the gap. Kenny Tete goes unmentioned. He's had an absolute blinder. He's been absolutely brilliant at right back. Good, solid defender. Is really in everything. Runs his heart out. Diop looks to me to keep his place. Hard to replace. I don't think we have the luxury of rotation, so it's actually the best man gets a shirt right now. I don't know how you could leave Tim Ream out of it. If Robinson's there, I guess we're much more comfortable. A few question marks over Tosin and his defensive record. He's a little bit accident prone. Takes a little bit too long on the ball sometimes, can get caught. He's very skillful and he's young, and he's a good defender, but he does get caught. We're not the quickest back four, so I think there are opportunities there to get in behind us for sure. And the big deal is that our defensive shield in Polinia is not there. So whether to your original question, whether that creates a sort of an anxiety or a lack of confidence in us really bouncing and pressing, I'm not sure.
I think this is going to be a really interesting game. It's going to be an interesting tactical setup between two really good managers. Newcastle are probably more desperate, really, for points. Desperate because we're mid-table, but we haven't won a game since the opening game of the season. So I think it's getting to a stage where we need to win a game soon. This is, on paper, one of the games that we would look to be targeting, I think, and especially with Fulham, like you're saying, with Paulinho out, I think we've really got to target this. Let's get some predictions then. This is always difficult. I said on your podcast, Elton, that I could see anything happening in this game. I could see a comfortable Fulham win. I could see a comfortable Newcastle win, or I could see a draw. But I think I've noticed that Fulham have had a few 3-2s already this season. So I'm going to go with a bit of a basketball match and a 3-2 win for Newcastle, which I would take. And it will be 2 o'clock in the morning by the time it finishes. So if we get an exciting game like that, there probably won't be much sleep happening in Brisbane. Keegan, what's your prediction for the match?
I'm going to go 1-1. I think I'm still worried about our lack of conversion with the chances we have. So I think it'll be an attacking game. Lots of shots, but not many goals. So I'll go 1-1.
All right. Elton, over to you on the spot.
Yeah, look, I think I jumped out of the box a couple of weeks ago, and when we were reviewing the month of October, and I thought we'd win this game at home. We're difficult to beat at home. It's a small pitch. It kind of suits the way we play, and I thought we would be a 3-2. Because we're still leaky. We do leak goals. We're just scoring lots of them. But I actually think now with Paulinho having a rest, I think we'd probably be delighted with a 2-2 draw. So I think I'm going to go with that 2-2.
All right. It really is a game that's going to be difficult to predict. Newcastle have got quite a good record at Craven Cottage. We've been seeming to play towards the end of the seasons lately when Fulham have already been relegated. So that's obviously not the instance this time. But Elton, thanks very much for coming on. Thanks for those insights. It's like I said at the beginning, it's always really good to get the insights of an opposition fan and get some knowledge about the players. I'm sure we'll catch up with you again at some point, probably before the return fixture at St James's Park. So thanks very much for coming on.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been great.
No problem. And Keegan, good luck watching the rerun of the grand final. You'll enjoy that one.
I can't wait. Hopefully the good times roll on after the game as well. Get 2 wins on the one Saturday.
All right, we'll see everybody soon. We've got this as a watch along actually. Craig and Lee will be doing the Fulham watch along, and then they'll be back for the review of the match, and then after that we'll be back next week for a Brentford look ahead and a watch along for that one as well. So thanks very much, boys, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, Jack.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elton.